The last thing Grandpa Ned ever said to me was, "Boy, when the walls start talking, you listen." I laughed at him then. I'm not laughing now. I came home sick from work on a Tuesday, nothing dramatic, a fever that crept up behind my eyes, a throat that felt like I'd swallowed gravel, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that makes a man feel ancient at 34. My boss had practically shoved me out the door at noon. "Go home, Marcus, you look like death." He wasn't wrong. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Clara's car was gone. She had her afternoon shift at the dental office, wouldn't be back until 6. I dragged myself inside, kicked off my shoes in the hallway, and shuffled toward the bedroom like a man walking through wet concrete. That's when I heard it. Scratch, 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 scratch. I stopped in the hallway, hands still on the wall for balance. The sound was coming from inside the wall itself, low and rhythmic, like fingernails dragged slowly across dry wood. It stopped, then started again. 3 quick scratches, a pause, then a long, deliberate one. I stood there for a long moment, head tilted, fever warm and half convinced I was imagining things. Scratch, scratch. I wasn't imagining it. When Clara came home that evening, I was sitting up in bed, laptop open, reading about rodent infestations. She appeared in the doorway with soup and crackers on a tray, took one look at my face, and laughed. "You heard the scratching," she said. "It wasn't a question." "What is that?" "Rats," she set the tray on my nightstand, completely unbothered. "Or mice, maybe. The exterminator said it's common in houses this old. I called someone, they're coming Thursday." "It doesn't sound like rats." She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed the back of her hand to my forehead. "You have a fever, babe. Everything sounds weird when you have a fever. Eat your soup." I ate the soup. I took the medicine she brought me. I lay back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to the scratching move slowly through the wall beside my head, east to west, like something packing. Rats don't pace. I should tell you about Grandpa Ned. He was my mother's father, a retired railroad man who smelled like pipe tobacco and motor oil and had hands so rough they could sand wood. He lived alone in a farmhouse outside Denton after Grandma passed, and every summer until I was about 12, my parents would drop me off there for 2 weeks while they took their adult vacation, which I now understand was code for saving their marriage. Grandpa Ned was not a warm man in the conventional sense. He didn't ruffle your hair or call you sport, but he talked to me like I was a person, like my thoughts had weight. He taught me to identify clouds, to read animal tracks, to tell the difference between the wind settling a house and something else. Something else, I'd asked once. I was maybe 8 years old, sitting on his porch in the dusk. "Houses collect things," he'd said, lighting his pipe. 30, 40, 50 years of living under one roof, all that emotion, all that memory, it seeps into the wood. Mostly it just sits there. He'd paused, blowing a slow stream of smoke into the purple evening air. "But sometimes it gets restless." "That's not real," I said, because I was 8 and had recently become very interested in being scientifically accurate. He'd looked at me sideways, not offended, just patient. "When the walls start talking, boy, you listen. Don't argue, don't explain it away. Just listen." He died the following February. Heart attack, quick and without ceremony, the way he would have wanted. I never spent another summer in that farmhouse. I grew up. I became a person who believed in exterminator appointments and rational explanations. Until Tuesday night, when the scratching stopped and something knocked. 3 times, slow and deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. From inside the wall. I sat up so fast the room tilted. Clara was asleep beside me, breathing slow and even. The fever had broken sometime around midnight, leaving me hollow and hyper-alert, every sense sharpened. The bedroom was dark, except for the blue glow of the streetlight through the curtains. Silence. Then softer, scratch. I got out of bed. I don't know why. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was screaming at me to lie back down, but Grandpa Ned's voice was louder. "You listen." I pressed my palm flat against the wall. The plaster was cool, I waited. Scratch, 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 knock. The vibration moved through my hand, up my arm, settled somewhere behind my sternum. It didn't feel like an animal. Animals are frantic, irregular, all nervous energy. This had rhythm. This had intention. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and turned on the flashlight. I moved down the hallway, following the wall with my fingertips, tracking the sound as it shifted, moving toward the small room at the end of the hall. The room we'd been calling the office for 2 years, though neither of us ever really used it. The room that had been locked when we bought the house, the one the previous owner, an elderly woman named Doris Hatch, who had moved to her daughter's place in Phoenix, had waved off with a thin smile and oh, that one just sticks. The door was open now. I stood in the doorway and swept the flashlight beam across the room. Empty, a desk we never used, a bookshelf with 3 forgotten paperbacks, and there, in the far corner, a section of baseboard trim that had pulled away from the wall. The gap behind it was dark and about 4 inches wide. I crouched down and pointed the light into the gap. 2 eyes blinked back at me. I lurched backward, heart slamming. Then the thing in the wall shifted, and I caught it in the full beam of my phone's light, and I felt the fear drain out of me and become something else entirely, something that ached. It was a cat. Old, grey-muzzled, profoundly thin, one ear torn at the tip. It stared at me with the absolute dignity that cats maintain even in the worst circumstances. It did not hiss. It did not flee. It simply looked at me the way Grandpa Ned used to, patient, waiting, certain I would eventually do the right thing. Around its neck, almost hidden in matted fur, was a collar. I reached in slowly, the way you approach any creature that has learned to be afraid of hands. The cat allowed it. I turned the tag toward the light. Biscuit, if found, call Margaret, 550-147. And below the phone number, in the same careful engraving, this cat belonged to my mother, Doris Hatch. Please be kind to him. I sat on the floor of that little office until 4 in the morning with Biscuit in my lap, feeding him crackers from the sleeve I'd brought back from the bedroom, while he purred like a small, broken engine. Clara found us there when she got up for water. She stood in the doorway in her robe and looked at me on the floor with the ancient cat and said nothing for a long moment. So she said finally, "Not rats. Not rats." She sat down beside me on the floor, and Biscuit regarded her with the same dignified skepticism he'd given me, then stepped off my lap and onto hers with the confidence of a creature who has decided to forgive the whole world for its negligence. We figured it out in pieces. Doris Hatch had moved to Phoenix 9 months ago quickly, her daughter had told our realtor, because of her health. In the rush, in the grief of leaving the house she'd lived in for 40 years, Biscuit had gotten spooked and hidden. The daughter had searched. The realtor had searched. But old houses have spaces inside them, between walls, above drop ceilings, under floors, that become whole countries to a small animal. He'd been living in the walls since before we moved in, probably surviving on whatever came through, insects, the occasional mouse, the dripping pipe in the southwest corner that we'd been meaning to fix. We called Margaret at a reasonable hour. She cried so hard she could barely speak. She was on a flight from Phoenix by Friday. When she came to collect Biscuit, she stood in our hallway holding him against her chest, her face buried in his fur, and she said, "He was everything left of her. I thought I'd lost him too." I think about Grandpa Ned a lot these days. I think about how he understood something I was too young and too smug to receive, that the world is full of signals we've trained ourselves not to hear, that strange sounds in old walls aren't always something to be explained away. Sometimes there's something to be answered. The exterminator came on Thursday anyway. He found no rats, no mice, nothing but a cat-shaped groove worn smooth in the plaster of the office wall and the ghost of old paw prints in the dust. I've kept the baseboard loose, just enough for a draft to get through. I'm not sure why. Maybe I just like knowing there are hidden spaces in this house, places where something small and frightened could find shelter. Or maybe I just want to stay in the habit of listening. Grandpa Ned would be pleased.